Lucas couldn't help but say, I saved Nora. It's only natural for her to thank me, right? Besides, my ex-boyfriend isn't pining after me at all. I haven't seen him for over half a year. Leo said, why didn't she offer herself in marriage as a token of gratitude? Your ex-boyfriend just mentioned that you'll run into him often in the future. That was what Nolan said. What does it have to do with him? It had been a long time since Lucas last heard the president speaking in such a sarcastic tone. While he found it utterly unreasonable, he also felt a bit nostalgic. He took a few deep breaths and said, even if I'm charming. So what? Why is he getting so proud? Leo gave a cold laugh and said, don't forget we signed an agreement. Privately, we're a couple. If you flirt with others openly, you're in violation of the contract, and I'll deduct your pay. After saying that, he added, from your side job. Lucas was shocked. Saying he was flirting was a bit too much. He was also a bit angry and said, deducting my pay for no reason. I'll file a labor arbitration. After thinking for a while, he added, then what do you suggest? Might as well lock me up and not let me go out. Hearing this, Leo stopped and fell silent. Lucas was even more surprised when he saw this. Could this guy really have such an idea? While being shocked, he realized something and said, do you remember a joke I told you before? A person was walking on the road and suddenly stepped on a lemon. Then he shouted, I'm so jealous. It was sweltering outside, and although the air conditioning in the car was on, it was still a bit hot. Leo tugged at his tie and said, anyway, you're not allowed to have much contact with Nolan. His voice was hoarse, with a hint of inexplicable emotion. Lucas also realized that it might not be a good idea to use the joke to mock Leo. What if Leo was so petty and held a grudge? So he said, I understand, Mr. Leo, but I still need to maintain normal social interactions. Otherwise, people will say I'm impolite. Anyway, he didn't have a chance to meet Nolan privately. Leo retracted his arm that had been resting on the back of the chair and said, you drive the car back and bring it to the company tomorrow. Lucas didn't say much and replied, okay, Mr. Leo. The two parted on bad terms in front of Yunting Mansion. The next day at work, Leo returned to normal, at least on the surface, just like usual. Lucas breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that the president was jealous, but there was no need for him to be jealous in their relationship. His reaction was a bit excessive. Before, Leo himself had held his hand and teased him in the office with the joke of beauty and the country. But yesterday, he lost his composure because of Nolan's call of beauty. Was it really necessary? Lucas didn't understand why the president was in a bad mood. Since Leo didn't mention it again, Lucas didn't take it seriously. But he gradually found that this matter wasn't over yet. Currently, the merger work has been launched. The speed project has returned to the right track, and Shirway has readjusted the R&D department. Several things are progressing simultaneously, and everyone is very busy at the moment. Whether it was the merger or the R&D matters, one had to deal with Nolan. Logically, they should often meet Mr. Nolan. But every time they were going to see Nolan, Leo would take other assistants instead of Lucas. After doing this several times, not only did Lucas realize it, but even Henry noticed. Henry asked Lucas, Secretary Lucas, have you offended Nolan? Lucas shook his head and said expressionlessly, it's not Mr. Nolan that I've offended. It was Leo that he had offended. There was no need to tell Henry about this kind of thing. Lucas didn't say much, but asked, is the relationship between Mr. Leo and Mr. Nolan not good? Lucas knew that the chairman was partial, but he wasn't sure if Leo would hate his elder brother because of this. Henry stroked his chin and said, it's hard to say whether it's good or not. The two of them never take the initiative to contact each other, but they've never publicly quarreled either. Henry patted his chest and looked relieved. Fortunately, Nolan put his talent in the wrong place. Otherwise, if he also participated in the company's operation and the two of them fought, it would really be terrible. Lucas said, is Jean letting him be in charge of the capital injection this time to let him gradually get involved in business affairs? Henry said, on Jin's side, he has always wanted Nolan to take over as the chairman. But Nolan didn't agree before and was only focused on scientific research. It's really thought-provoking that he got involved this time. Lucas worried. Moreover, he also knows that we're going to focus on developing the R&D department. Will he cause trouble? Henry patted him on the shoulder and said, Mr. Leo knows all these things. He has ways to deal with them. Although his relationship with Nolan is cold, he knows his elder brother very well. Don't worry. Lucas couldn't help but worry, because he thought Leo's reaction was a bit over the top. After some more time passed, Lucas still wasn't able to participate in any business activities related to Nolan. Finally, he couldn't hold it in anymore and went to Leo's office. Mr. Leo, I think the work arrangements you've given me recently are very unreasonable. Lucas stood in front of Leo and stated his demands word by word. These are crucial times for the company. I can't participate in many projects. I think this is unfair and has a great impact on my personal development. Leo sat at his desk, looking at the tablet in his hand without raising his head, and just said, I have my own arrangements. Lucas continued to express his dissatisfaction. But I think this arrangement is unreasonable. Leo finally looked up at him and asked, So eager to see Nolan? Lucas looked back at the president in disbelief. He was talking about serious business, and this guy was acting like this. This was the first time Lucas thought Leo was being unreasonable. He turned around, went back to the door, made sure the office door was closed so no one would barge in, then came back, stood closer and said to Leo, Mr. Leo, I'm applying to switch to the side business mode. Leo watched his every move, his eyes deep, and said, It's not off work time yet. Lucas said, I know, so I'm making this application. It won't take much time. Leo said, Okay. Having gotten permission, Lucas immediately put away his submissive look, raised his eyebrows and said loudly, Mr. Leo, let me tell you another joke. One day, a little plum said to its mother, Mom, I'm not feeling well today. Can I skip school? The plum mother asked, Where do you feel bad? The little plum said, I feel so sore all over. Leo raised his hand and rubbed the space between his eyebrows, saying, Stop being unreasonable. This guy was even shifting the blame. Lucas took several deep breaths and said seriously, Mr. Leo, ask yourself, who is being unreasonable? Is it really because of work arrangements that you won't let me contact Mr. Nolan? Leo remained silent. Lucas continued, Mr. Leo, this time it's you who is mixing personal feelings with work. Lucas never expected that Nolan's one-word beauty would still bother Leo until now. But things couldn't go on like this all the time, as it had already affected his normal work. Seeing that Leo still didn't say a word, Lucas said, Then let me continue telling jokes. With a gloomy face, Leo finally spoke, Stop telling jokes. He reached out his hand towards Lucas and said, Come here. Lucas thought that it was so spineless of him to go to Leo every time he was called. Even so, he still obediently stood beside Leo. Leo said, It's still the side job mode now, right? Lucas nodded. Leo wanted to hold Lucas' hand again, but this time Lucas withdrew it. Leo looked at him displeasedly. Lucas said, I know you've just got rid of your misophobia and you're curious about touching others, but you can't always touch me, especially when he was still angry. So that's what he thought. Leo lowered his eyes and said, I haven't got rid of my misophobia. I still don't like others touching what belongs to me. So he couldn't tolerate Nolan. Lucas believed that there was a deeper reason for Leo's repulsion towards Nolan than just this. He thought for a while and softened his tone. How about I definitely won't take the initiative to talk to Mr. Nolan, but you have to let me work normally. Leo also knew that he was in the wrong this time, but his long-standing pride made it hard for him to admit it. He said, I'm going to conduct a research at the group's R&D center tomorrow. You come with me. Lucas knew that the president had given in. His eyes lit up and he finally showed a smile. Looking at the curve of his eyes, Leo deliberately said, "You're happy when I give in to you." Lucas smiled and said, "I argued rationally and got a good result. Of course I'm happy." Leo's gaze slid from his smiling eyes to his rosy lips, and finally he lowered his head and landed on his fair fingers, saying, "Then give me your hand." Only then did Lucas stuff his hand into Leo's palm. The next day, Leo really kept his word and took Lucas to the R&D center. This time, Lucas looked straight ahead and didn't exchange much greetings with Nolan, even when he saw him. Nolan didn't tease anymore either. He didn't address Lucas as Beauty, but just politely called him Secretary Lucas. Leo's expression remained the same, neither good nor bad, and he didn't mention those unnecessary things. Fortunately, all three of them were reliable at work. Shirway had obtained the key technology of the charging module and successfully restored the production capacity of the Speed project. After other cooperation merchants learned this news, they all approached Shirway, and the number of orders increased a lot for a while. After all, having technology means having the market. The old technical department of Shirexayan was integrated with Shirway to establish a new R&D department. Taking this opportunity, Leo went to the R&D Center for a research, hoping that the group's R&D Center could provide support. Nolan promised on the surface. Lucas always felt that there was something fishy about it. Last time, Nolan listened to the chairman and secretly gave the technology to Shirexayan without telling Shirway. He didn't know what kind of trap he would set this time. Leo led the research group to visit the laboratory and asked a lot of questions on the way. Nolan answered them all, and everything seemed very harmonious. Lucas followed the team and cooperated with the president as usual, providing support for the president. After walking around, the technical staff in the team continued to have further exchanges with the experts in the R&D center. Leo and Nolan went to the office floor to talk alone. Nolan said, "There are still some supplementary data regarding the charging aspect. You can take them away today if you want." Leo looked at his elder brother with a gloomy expression and said, "You're being so generous that it makes me nervous." Nolan smiled and said, "If you're nervous, do you want to go to the hospital and have a check?" Leo ignored his joke and said, "You're also in charge of the communication with Jean. With the R&D center on your plate, can you handle it all?" Nolan looked a bit distressed. "I really can't manage it all. I haven't published many papers this year. I wish I could split myself in two." With a smile on his lips, he said, "It seems I have to give up one side. What do you think if I give up scientific research and focus on investment with Jean?" Investing meant becoming Leo's competitor in the end. Leo still said the same thing. "Stop joking." Nolan said lazily, "All right, I'll focus on the present. Anyway, I'm handling both sides currently. You'll have to put up with it even if you don't like it." Then he turned to Lucas with a smile and said, "Secretary Lucas, please go and get the materials I mentioned just now. They're in the data center. Someone there will give them to you." Lucas didn't expect Nolan to call on him suddenly. He subconsciously looked at Leo. Leo looked calm and said, "Go ahead." Seeing that Leo had no objection, Lucas nodded and walked towards the elevator to go to the data center. The data center was outside the R&D building. Lucas walked out of the building and passed through the small garden in the middle. Suddenly, he heard someone calling him. "Lucas." There was a hint of surprise in the voice that called him. Lucas turned his head and saw Benjamin. Benjamin, who hadn't appeared for a long time, didn't look much different from before, except that he looked a bit haggard. Unexpectedly meeting this person here, Lucas frowned. After a moment's hesitation, he decided to pretend not to see him and continued walking forward. But Benjamin rushed forward and blocked his way. Staring deeply at him, he asked, "How are you?" What did this strange question after a long-time reunion mean? He said, "Whether I'm okay or not has nothing to do with you." Benjamin sighed. "If you talk like this, it means you still resent me." Lucas said coldly, "You're so melodramatic. You think too highly of yourself. I've almost forgotten about you." He took a few steps forward, but Benjamin still didn't move aside. Lucas looked around suspiciously and asked, "Why are you here?" Benjamin stared at Lucas' face greedily and said, "I'm here to see Mr. Nolan. I want to rejoin your group's team." After not seeing Lucas for some time, Lucas was even more beautiful than before. His lips were red and his teeth were white. His eyes were clear and lively, but there was a bit more calmness at the corners of his eyes. When he looked up, Benjamin's heart skipped a beat following his gaze. Lucas hated Benjamin's undisguised look. He sneered, "You were kicked out once and still want to come back. It's just wishful thinking, isn't it?" Benjamin said, "Last time it was because I offended your superior. This time I want to join the group's team, which has little to do with your company, right?" It wasn't too stupid of Benjamin to choose the group as a breakthrough this time. Lucas said with a straight face, "Then go find someone. It has nothing to do with me. I still have work to do. Please get out of the way." Benjamin ignored him and continued to ask, "Are you still with your superior?" Lucas was stunned for a moment before he remembered that in Benjamin's eyes, he and Leo were also in a romantic relationship. The reason could be traced back to a birthday party of a big shot a year ago when he casually put his arm around Leo's. Lucas clicked his tongue mentally but remained calm on the surface and said, "Of course, we have a good relationship." There was a clause in his contract with Leo stating that they should also pretend to be a couple in front of his ex-boyfriend and the other woman. A flash of unwillingness crossed Benjamin's eyes as he said, "You really do like the rich." Lucas was stunned by this man's audacity. "You were the one who cheated first. It was you who curried favor with the school principal and got together with his son. How dare you say that about me?" Benjamin said, "My relationship with Thomas, forget it. Let's not talk about that." Benjamin was still with Thomas. However, recently, Benjamin felt that he was losing control of Thomas. So he was eager to prove himself in his career and tried to join Bangtion's R&D team. "I'll be collaborating with this side from now on. We should see each other often." Benjamin looked at Lucas eagerly. Lucas felt sick just thinking about what this man was scheming and said, "Whether you can join is still up in the air. Don't be so sure of yourself." But Benjamin was very confident. "Mr. Nolan accepted the painting I gave him. It should be okay." Lucas was surprised. No wonder he thought the painting in Nolan's office looked familiar. He had seen artworks of that style in Benjamin's house before. Whether it was the painting or the artworks, they should be related to Thomas. Lucas didn't know how Nolan was involved with Thomas and Benjamin. He just felt that it wasn't a good thing. He waved his hand distractedly and said, "I have to go to work." But Benjamin didn't want to let him go. Running into Lucas by chance today made Benjamin's heart stir. Why did he act so stupidly back then and give up such a beautiful person? Lucas started to get impatient. "If you don't get out of the way, I'll punch you." Just as the two were at a standstill, another voice came. "Secretary Lucas, why have you been gone so long?" Lucas turned his head and saw Nolan walking over. Seeing Benjamin standing beside Lucas, Nolan rarely didn't smile. Instead, he said, "No wonder you didn't come back for so long. It turns out you were held up by someone." Seeing that the person coming was not Leo, Lucas inexplicably let out a sigh of relief and said, "Sorry, Mr. Nolan. I'll go get the materials right away." Nolan said, "No need. I'll go myself. You go back quickly. Mr. Leo is still waiting for you." Lucas knew that Nolan was helping him out and gave him a grateful look. At this time, seeing Nolan, Benjamin quickly said, "Mr. Nolan, how have you considered what I said last time?" Nolan's attitude was rather gentle. He said, "To tell you the truth, the hope is slim. You'd better look for other companies. But our school has signed a cooperation agreement with yours. Besides, I'm not lacking in ability. You've also read my thesis." Benjamin finally saw Nolan and seized the opportunity to promote himself. "Moreover, you liked that painting very much." Nolan didn't understand why Benjamin would mention the painting and frowned. Seeing the two of them talking, Lucas wanted to take the opportunity to leave. But Benjamin could still be distracted. Seeing Lucas about to slip away, he subconsciously reached out his hand towards him. Lucas quickly dodged to the side. Seeing that Benjamin still wanted to pester Lucas, Nolan stepped forward and stood in front of Lucas, sneering, "Can't you see that the person doesn't want to?" So the two of them surrounded Lucas from left and right. Lucas secretly groaned. He just wanted to leave quietly. If the president saw this picture of him being sandwiched like a biscuit, he would be finished. Took him a lot of effort to appease Leo. Unfortunately, what he didn't want to happen would surely happen. The voice of a third person came, cold and heartless, sounding like a death knell in Lucas's ears. "What are you doing?" Leo's tall figure appeared in the small garden. He stood not far away, staring fixedly at the three of them, with a gloomy face and cold eyes. Leo's sudden appearance made the other three people stunned. Lucas was so frightened that he was stunned. Benjamin was a bit afraid of Leo and didn't dare to say a word. On the contrary, Nolan showed a meaningful look. He even moved closer to Lucas. He turned sideways, blocked Leo's sight with his back, lowered his head, and whispered to Lucas, "It's so interesting, Secretary Lucas." Lucas knew that the young Master Chin was in a playful mood. He looked at Nolan pleadingly and whispered, "Mr. Nolan, don't add fuel to the fire." From Leo's perspective, Nolan had his head down and Lucas had his head up. The two of them were huddled together whispering. Leo's head buzzed. He walked over, directly pushed Nolan away, took Lucas by the hand, and dragged him out. When he was walking, he almost bumped into Benjamin beside him. Leo looked up at Benjamin, and his gaze was like looking at a dead man. "Do you want to die?" Leo said a word. Benjamin had met Leo several times, and every time it was not a good thing. He had a natural fear of this cold-blooded president. At this time, when he heard what Leo said and met his terrifying eyes, he almost knelt on the ground. Nolan stood aside, smiling with interest on his face as he watched this scene. Leo didn't let him off. He dragged Lucas in front of Nolan and said gloomily, "You're snatching my things again." The smile on Nolan's face froze. He was stunned for a moment, then lowered his eyes to hide the loneliness in his eyes. Leo pulled Lucas away, and Lucas didn't even dare to breathe loudly throughout the whole process. Leo didn't even care about the research team he brought. He directly took Lucas to the parking lot and stuffed him into the car. From beginning to end, he didn't say a word. His face was cold and his eyes were sinister. When Leo stared at Lucas, it seemed as if he wanted to eat him. When he pressed Lucas onto the passenger seat, his movements were also very rough. Lucas knew that Leo would be angry, but he didn't know that he would be so angry. Before, when Leo was jealous, Lucas thought that he was just used to marking his territory and being protective, so he didn't allow himself to have more contact with Nolan. But now it seems that it's far more than that. Is it deliberately acted out for Nolan to see? To make Nolan think that they are showing off their affection? It doesn't seem so. Leo's emotions are more than just jealousy. At that time, both Benjamin and Nolan were there. When Leo faced Benjamin, he only showed disgust, while when facing Nolan, his emotions were more complicated. If Lucas didn't misread, there seemed to be hatred in Leo's eyes when he looked at Nolan. Lucas looked at Leo. Leo was in a bad mood and sat in the driver's seat, looking like he was about to start the car. Lucas said weakly, "Mr. Leo, how about I drive?" Lucas was afraid that they would end up on the social news tomorrow if Leo drove in such a mood. Leo just glanced at Lucas, and Lucas didn't dare to say more. Fortunately, after the car started, although it was going fast, it was still relatively stable. Lucas stole a cautious look at the president. He saw that the president was expressionless, with a cold aura around him, looking like anyone who talked to him would be courting death. Lucas made up his mind. Even if it was courting death, he had to say it. He said, "Benjamin wanted to join the Group's R&D team and went to see Mr. Nolan. He just happened to meet me there. He pestered me and Mr. Nolan saw it. Mr. Nolan stepped in to help me out and stopped Benjamin from harassing me. He quickly explained what had happened and said anxiously, "It was all a coincidence. Mr. Nolan didn't mean any harm." The more he talked, the worse Leo's face became. The car took a sharp turn, and Lucas swayed in his seat. "Shut up." Lucas didn't dare to say a word. But sitting in the passenger seat, the more he thought about it, the more wronged he felt. He didn't do anything wrong, yet he still had to bear Leo's bad temper. It was so inexplicable. Leo hadn't been so fierce to him for a long time. The car sped on the road in silence. After a long time, Leo finally found a place to stop the car. He turned his head and looked at his little secretary. Lucas shrank in his seat, holding the seat belt tightly, lowering his head, gently biting his lips, with a look of defiance and fear on his face. The junior secretary started to be afraid of him again. After a long time, their relationship had eased a lot. When they got along privately, it was no longer stiff or awkward. Could even be said to be very harmonious. But today, it suddenly went back to square one. Why was Lucas always afraid of him, but could talk and laugh when facing Nolan? They had been getting along for a year and it was still the same way. But he hit it off with Nolan at first sight. Leo slapped the steering wheel hard. Lucas was startled by the noise. He looked up in surprise. After seeing Leo's actions, the dissatisfaction in his heart gradually showed in his eyes. He straightened up and said to Leo, "Mr. Leo, I've already explained what needs to be explained. I really can't understand why you're so angry." Leo didn't say a word. Lucas got angry and said, "You're always like this, saying nothing. I have to guess your thoughts. It's so tiring." He took a deep breath and continued, "I remember when I first came to the president's office. I was on tenterhooks every day, afraid of misunderstanding your intentions. It's not like that anymore. I thought I knew you quite well, but today I found I was completely wrong." Lucas didn't think he or Nolan had done anything to make Leo angry. Benjamin's appearance was purely accidental. Why did Leo react so strongly? It was just unreasonable. Leo still didn't say a word. Of course, Lucas wouldn't understand. The existence of Nolan itself was a reminder to him. It reminded him of his due sense of propriety. Once, everyone said in his ear that his elder brother didn't have a mother, so he couldn't fight with him. If he didn't fight, he gradually lost everything. Leo leaned over and pulled Lucas over. Lucas frowned in pain as the seat belt tightened around him, but Leo didn't care. He stroked the skin from Lucas' cheek to his chin with his fingers, the movement a bit rough. Leo said, "I just don't like others touching what's mine, especially Nolan." He didn't like Lucas smiling at Nolan, nor did he like Nolan calling Lucas beauty. The game of beauty and the country can only be played between them in private. Lucas was puzzled and looked at Leo blankly. "But before, you even sent me to work at the R&D center. Wasn't everything fine then?" At that time, Leo even sent him to meet Nolan alone. Why did his attitude suddenly change? Leo's eyes flickered. Situations change because the state of mind is different. Leo finally said a word and then chose to be silent again, which disappointed Lucas. Lucas knew that something must have happened to Leo in the Chin family before, which was why he had a stress reaction to Nolan. Leo's psychological barriers were so serious that they couldn't have formed overnight. But Lucas also understood that Leo wouldn't tell him the reason because he was just a secretary. Why should he be allowed to know his boss's family affairs? Lucas was a bit disappointed. Maybe there would be more similar things waiting for him in the future. He couldn't ask for reasons, couldn't have his own thoughts, and could only follow Leo's wishes. Whatever Leo told him to do, he would do it. Lucas felt extremely stuffy in his heart. He thought he had made some progress this year, but in fact, he still couldn't understand Leo's heart. Leo's fingers had moved to Lucas' neck, and his fingertips pressed against the carotid artery. Under the warm fingers, the vital blood was flowing. Lucas was being strangled by the seat belt to the point of suffocation, but he said gently, "I want to get out of the car, Mr. Leo." Leo was stunned. Lucas' tone was so calm, even gentle. Leo subconsciously let him go. Lucas could finally breathe. He unbuckled his seat belt, opened the door, and got out of the car. Only then did Leo react and got out of the car too, asking, "Where are you going?" However, Lucas didn't answer. He turned around and started running directly, dashing into the alley beside the road in one breath. He ran for a while until he was exhausted. After making sure that Leo didn't catch up, he slowed down his pace. It was the end of summer and the beginning of autumn. The weather was still hot. Lucas had run all the way and was sweating all over. He self-destructively didn't call a taxi. Fortunately, Leo had driven the car near the company, and his residence was not far from the company. He walked for a while and directly walked back home. As soon as he got back to his rental house, Lucas turned on the air conditioner and collapsed on the bed. He stared blankly at the ceiling. After a long time, he saw the Mr. Leo doll on the cabinet out of the corner of his eye. The doll was sitting there all alone, with Leo's photo on it, but it wasn't Leo. Lucas thought to himself, why did he only think about doing as Leo said before? But now he started to be dissatisfied. He started to oppose Leo and began to try to understand Leo's thoughts. It must be the side job that gave him an illusion. They were just pretending to be a couple. Everything was fake, but he really got carried away and started to act up. The next day, Lucas went to work. He was a bit listless, with a dizzy head that ached from time to time. Probably because he had run outdoors for half a day yesterday and then blown the air conditioner when he got home. Early in the morning, he gulped down a cup of coffee, forcing himself to cheer up. He still arrived at the office early as usual, checked every place thoroughly, and waited for the president to come to the company. Leo also arrived on time. Lucas stood at his position and shouted, "Good morning, Mr. Leo." Leo nodded, looking normal. "Good morning." He walked towards the office. After only a few steps, he turned back, looked at Lucas' slightly red-rimmed eyes, and asked, "Not feeling well?" Lucas smiled and said, "No, I just didn't sleep well." Leo gave him a deep look, but in the end said nothing and turned to enter the office. Lucas breathed a sigh of relief. No matter what had happened, Leo would not let it affect his work, which made Lucas feel relaxed too. The work was still busy. Leo summoned several key members of the R&D department to the meeting room and held a meeting with them based on his research in the R&D center. Finally, everyone came to the conclusion that to engage in R&D, they still had to compete for talents. It was because the R&D center had the scientific research giant Nolan sitting in charge that it could firmly hold the technology in its hands. But where could they find talents? In City S, there was only City S University, a first-class university, and there weren't many other scientific research institutions. One of them even had Nolan as the deputy director. Just as Nolan said, the scientific research circle was too small, and they would bump into each other no matter what. "We can only introduce talents from other provinces or even foreign countries," the R&D department supervisor said. Leo, of course, understood this, but it wasn't that easy to achieve. Fortunately, they were integrating Shirexian, and everything was getting better steadily. The matter of finding talents wasn't that urgent. Lucas accompanied the president all the time and took meeting notes as usual. Only today he had a terrible headache. He tightly held the voice recorder and forced himself to concentrate. His face was a bit pale. Clearly, the temperature wasn't low. The air conditioner was on in the meeting room and others still felt hot, but he started to feel cold. Fortunately, the meeting went smoothly, and Lucas did the finishing work without any mistakes. By noon, Lucas felt his throat dry and sore. Only then did he realize that he should have caught a cold. He didn't dare to take it lightly and quickly brewed a packet of cold medicine and drank it before eating. Maybe it was psychological, but after taking the medicine, Lucas felt much better and continued to throw himself into work in the afternoon. Tragically, the illusion only lasted for an hour. After that, Lucas' throat hurt more and more. His nose became stuffy, and he felt as if he was stepping on cotton. He really shouldn't have run home in a fit of pique and blown the air conditioner yesterday. He was working while lying on the table when Leo called him in. Lucas quickly stood up, wiped his nose, cleared his throat, patted his face to make it look a bit more rosy. After making sure he looked okay, he walked into the president's office. Lucas entered Leo's office. When Leo saw him come in, he didn't waste any words and directly said, "I'm going to city in the day after tomorrow. I'll leave from the company later this afternoon and won't be back until next Monday. There are still some itinerary changes here. You're in charge of handling them and receiving guests." It was quite normal for the president to go on a business trip suddenly. Lucas shouldn't have been surprised, but perhaps because of his cold, he felt a bit dazed when he heard the news that Leo was leaving. Thinking about it the other way around, they wouldn't have to see each other for a few days. Maybe that was a good thing. Lucas pursed his lips and said, "Okay, Mr. Leo, I'll arrange everything properly." Leo looked up at him and asked, "What's wrong with your voice?" Lucas smiled and said, "I've got a bit of a cold. It's nothing serious." Leo said, "Take good care of yourself and don't let it affect your work." Lucas replied, "I understand. Thank you, Mr. Leo." Leo waved his hand. Lucas received the work arrangement and left the office. At the moment when the door was gently closed, Leo subconsciously followed that figure, but soon the door panel blocked his sight. At 3:30 in the afternoon, Leo left the company. Lucas handled the following things as instructed and was busy until evening. His throat still felt uncomfortable and his nose was getting more and more blocked. He had no appetite, so he went to the canteen and ordered a bowl of porridge for dinner and just took a couple of mouthfuls. He didn't sleep well at night. He either woke up because his nose was blocked or his throat was so dry from breathing through his mouth that it felt like it was going to crack. He tossed and turned all night and finally, dawn broke. Lucas got up, washed up and went to work. He felt like he had a low-grade fever, but fortunately, it was Friday today. He just had to hold on for one more day and then he could have a good rest. Leo was already in City Inn and wouldn't appear today, which also relieved Lucas. There was still a lot of work, but without the boss around, he felt a bit more relaxed mentally. Lucas was secretly wiping his nose while looking at the computer, looking a bit disheveled. Everyone in the president's office knew that Secretary Lucas had a cold. Nora walked over and sized up Lucas. Lucas asked warily, "Is there something wrong, Assistant Joseph?" Nora stared at Lucas' red nose and said, "You've become ugly," thinking that everyone was like she sure, looking better when sick. He said irritably, "Isn't it just right to be ugly? It saves you from saying every time that I got my position by my looks." Nora threw a pack of throat lozenges on Lucas' desk and said, "Get well soon. You look more pleasing to the eye when you're good looking." After saying that, she went back to her seat. Lucas picked up the pack of throat lozenges, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Couldn't this person just speak nicely when giving him something? Speaking of which, this kind of duplicitous style was a bit like Leo. No wonder Leo recruited Nora. Maybe it was because they sympathized with each other. Lucas thought of Leo and felt a bit stuffy in his chest. It was the first time he had such a situation with Leo. It wasn't really a quarrel. He just didn't know how to face it. In the past, he just had to follow the president's wishes. He didn't know why he couldn't do it this time. In the past, when Leo was dissatisfied, he either satirized him with words or gave him a hard time at work. This kind of cold treatment was also the first time. Lucas sighed and began to reflect on himself. Why did he go against the president? It was just not talking to Nolan. It wasn't a difficult thing. He didn't have much interaction with Nolan anyway. If the president was unhappy, just smooth things over. This matter would be over. Why take it seriously and make it like this? Lucas felt a bit reluctant in his heart, but he still made up his mind. When Leo came back on Monday, he would go and apologize, show some weakness and turn the page on this matter. After all, the president was his breadwinner, giving him double the salary. Even if he couldn't take the money and solve the problems for the president, he shouldn't cause trouble. Lucas continued to work while thinking about these things. The symptoms of the cold became more and more obvious. When making a phone call to the partner, the other side could tell, "Secretary Lucas, you seem to be very sick." Other assistants in the president's office also noticed. Someone came over and advised him, "Secretary Lucas, why don't you take a sick leave?" Lucas waved his hand and said, "It's just a common cold. It will go away naturally in 7 days. It's nothing serious. It's too much of a loss to take a sick leave for a cold. It's Friday today. Just hold on until the end of work." Finally, it was time to get off work. Lucas had no intention of working overtime and left the company in a hurry. He definitely had a fever. He felt cold all over, but his cheeks were burning. On his way home, Lucas went to the pharmacy to buy a thermometer, antipyretic, and anti-inflammatory drugs. When he got home, he realized that he was so muddled-headed that he forgot to solve the problem of dinner. Looking at the obviously high number on the thermometer, Lucas was too lazy to go out to look for food. During the peak dining time on weekends, it would take a long time to wait for takeout. So he resigned himself to getting up, rummaged through his barren kitchen, and found a pack of instant noodles to cook for himself. Actually, he didn't feel hungry at all. He just forced himself to eat a little to keep himself from collapsing. After all this, Lucas took the medicine and threw himself onto the bed. Finally, he could have a good rest. He fell asleep in a daze, but still felt uncomfortable. Although it was already autumn, the daytime temperature was still not low, and the temperature difference was getting larger. The temperature in the room didn't drop. At first, he felt hot while sleeping, and then it got cooler at night. He felt cold again as he slept. Lucas originally had a cold. With the temperature changing from hot to cold, his body got wet and then dry, making him even more uncomfortable. A cold will be cured in 7 days. He silently repeated this in his heart. There was no other way. He just had to get through the first 2 most serious days. He knew rationally that people tend to be a bit vulnerable emotionally when they are sick. If he hadn't gone out to make a living on his own and had stayed at home depending on his parents, he could have a bowl of hot soup when he was sick now. Lucas sighed silently and forced himself not to think about those things and go back to sleep quickly. After a while, in his hazy sleep, he heard a strange sound. Kept making noise and made him feel flustered. He pulled up the quilt to cover his head, trying to ignore the sound, but it was completely useless. The sound became louder and more persistent. Lucas forced himself to open his eyes and then realized that it was the doorbell ringing. Oh my God! Who could it be at this time? The doorbell kept ringing relentlessly like a death knell. Lucas summoned all his strength to get out of bed. Too lazy to put on his slippers, he staggered towards the door. His limbs were weak. He grasped the doorknob and tugged at it several times before pulling the door open. Looking dazedly at the person outside the door, he was about to ask, "Who is it?" The words died on his lips. He saw Leo standing at the door. Lucas regained a moment of clarity, but he suspected he was dreaming. In the dream, Leo frowned when he saw Lucas open the door and said, "You open the door without even asking who it is. You're too defenseless." It wasn't a dream after all. The moment he opened his mouth, it was criticism. It was really the president. Lucas tugged at the corners of his lips, forcing a smile and saying, "Mr. Leo, weren't you in City N? Why have you come here?" Leo was wearing a tie and was neatly dressed. It seemed that he had just come from a formal occasion. He looked at Lucas without saying a word. Leo was indeed in City N 4 hours ago. That day when he came back from the R&D center, not wanting to face Lucas, he adjusted his work schedule and went to City N. But before leaving, he found that his junior secretary was sick. Although it didn't seem serious at that time, he always kept it in mind. This afternoon, he took the time to send a message to Henry, asking about Lucas' situation. Henry replied immediately, "Secretary Lucas? He's terribly ill. He's been blowing his nose since morning. The tip of his nose is red. His voice is hoarse. His eyes are watery. He must have a fever. What a poor thing." Leo knew that Henry must have exaggerated on purpose, but he still couldn't put his mind at ease. It was just a cold. Yet he immediately arranged for someone to take his place and went straight to the high-speed railway station to take the nearest train back to City S. He must be crazy to appear at Lucas' door at the fastest speed. Seeing that Leo still remained silent, exhaustion spread through Lucas' limbs once again. He didn't have the energy to deal with the silent president at the moment, so he said, "Mr. Leo, regardless of what the matter is, I'm taking a sick leave today and will handle it on Monday." Sure enough, his voice was hoarse, with a strong nasal tone. His skin was pale, but his cheeks had an abnormal flush, clearly indicating a high fever. After Lucas finished speaking, he prepared to close the door, but Leo wouldn't allow it. He blocked the door that was about to close and took a step into the room. Lucas was startled and involuntarily took a step back. However, due to his weakness, he couldn't stand steadily. As his body swayed, he was about to fall. Leo reached out to support him, picked him up in his arms, and used his back to press against the door to close it. Although the silent president didn't speak or explain, he was extremely efficient in action. He carried Lucas towards the inside of the room. Lucas was completely startled awake and stammered, "Mr. Leo, what are you doing?" Leo didn't expect that he would reach the end of this apartment after just a few steps. Holding Lucas in his arms and looking at the bed in the middle, he said with a complicated expression, "Your place is really small." Was this the time to complain about his small apartment? This was the place he rented right after graduation. Back then, as a college student in a city like S with high housing prices, it was already great for him to rent a one-bedroom apartment. He was just used to it and didn't change even when his salary increased. Lucas' face turned even redder. It was hard to tell if it was from embarrassment or illness. He simply closed his eyes, leaned on Leo's chest and said, "I'm dizzy. Let me rest for a while." Leo felt that the body in his arms had an abnormally high temperature. He walked to the bed and gently placed Lucas on it, treating him like a precious treasure, afraid of breaking him. Leo covered Lucas with the quilt and asked, "Have you taken your medicine?" Lucas nodded with his eyes closed. Leo stroked his forehead and softly said, "Take a nap first. It was just a cold, nothing serious." But because there was someone around to care about him, Lucas became vulnerable. He opened his eyes, looked at Leo, and said meaninglessly, "Mr. Leo, go back quickly." Leo patted his cheek and said, "We'll talk about things after you recover. Just have a good rest first." Only then did Lucas close his eyes again. He had taken the medicine and was very tired, so he had no time to think about other things. Seeing that Lucas had fallen asleep, Leo tucked the quilt in for him and then got up to look around the house. To be honest, it was really small, just one bedroom and one living room. In Leo's eyes, one could barely turn around in it. He gave Lucas so much salary, but he didn't know where the money had gone. Leo walked into the living room and saw half a bowl of instant noodles on the coffee table. He frowned, perhaps knowing that someone was guarding beside him. Lucas slept peacefully and soundly this time. The medicine gradually took effect. Lucas broke out in a sweat and his body temperature dropped. When he felt better physically, the feeling of hunger emerged. He had only eaten a little of that bowl of instant noodles just now, and he woke up slowly in the middle of the night. The room was completely dark. He turned his head and saw a faint glimmer of light not far from his side. Someone was sitting by the bed looking at a mobile phone. Lucas opened his eyes in surprise and said, "Mr. Leo, you haven't left yet?" His voice was hoarse beyond recognition. Leo reached out to turn on the bedside lamp, looked at him in the orange-yellow light, and asked, "Are you feeling better?" Lucas nodded. Leo poured a glass of water, helped Lucas sit up, supported his back with one hand and brought the water cup to his lips with the other. Lucas was flattered and quickly took the water cup, saying, "I'll do it myself." His hands were still a bit weak and he held the cup unsteadily. Leo held his hand and exerted a little force to help him drink the water. Lucas was very embarrassed. He even needed the president's help to drink water. Was he being too delicate? Leo felt that the hand against Lucas's back was completely wet. Seeing that Lucas had finished the whole glass of water, he said, "Change your clothes. I'll go and get you something to eat to fill your stomach before you go back to sleep." Lucas was even more surprised. Leo went to the wardrobe, took out a set of pajamas and put it beside Lucas. Then he turned around and went to the kitchen. Lucas looked at the president's actions in a daze, not understanding why he was so familiar with this place. Lucas had just taken off his soaked clothes and hadn't had time to put on the new ones when Leo walked in with a bowl of noodles. The dim yellow light shines on the fair skin, creating an atmosphere of gentle and jade-like elegance. The curve of the waist is so perfect, like a carved work of art. What's even more fatal is that the light clearly illuminates the muscle texture and the hollows of the bones. Leo stopped. Lucas quickly put on his clothes and was also stunned when he saw the bowl in the president's hand. Leo regained his composure and stuffed the noodles into Lucas' hand, saying, "Have something to eat." Lucas looked down. In the clear soup were distinct strands of noodles, covered with a poached egg. Through the tender white egg white, one could see the golden yolk faintly flowing. It would definitely be tender and slippery to eat. There were also some sliced marinated beef beside, cut into regular thin slices and dotted with green scallions, which made one's mouth water. It was much more luxurious than the instant noodles he had eaten before. Lucas held the noodle bowl and looked at Leo eagerly, asking, "Mr. Leo, did you make this noodles?" The answer was self-evident, but there were no such ingredients in his home. Leo said, "I took your key and went out, so that's how it was." Lucas then asked, "Have you eaten?" Leo was a bit impatient and ordered him, "Stop talking nonsense and eat quickly while it's hot." Only then did Lucas pick up the chopsticks and lowered his head to eat the noodles. It was so delicious. Lucas had been sick and his mouth had no taste, but he could still feel the smoothness of the noodles and the freshness of the soup. He was touched while eating. Leo suddenly appeared beside him, not only accompanied him but also took care of him and cooked for him. Lucas completely forgot about the previous unpleasantness. At this moment, he loudly declared in his heart that the president was the most virtuous capitalist in the world. Being sick also consumed a lot of energy. After Lucas finished the noodles, he felt revived. He sat on the bed and sighed comfortably. The virtuous capitalist took away the noodle bowl, then pulled out a tissue and reached out to wipe Lucas' mouth. This was too much. Lucas blushed and said, "I'll do it myself." Lucas didn't get out of bed the whole time. Leo tidied up everything and then sat down again on the chair beside the bed. Leo said, "Go back to sleep." The president's tone was so gentle that it made Lucas feel dazed. He glanced at the time and found that it was already past 1 o'clock. It was unrealistic to ask Leo to go back. He lifted the quilt and wanted to get out of bed. Leo stopped him and asked, "What's wrong?" Lucas said, "Mr. Leo, you rest here. I'll go and sleep outside." There was only a sofa in the small living room outside. Lucas spoke hoarsely with a nasal voice. His condition was only a little better than before. He was still sick, and it was not suitable for him to sleep on the sofa. Leo pressed him back into the bed and said, "Stop making a fuss and sleep well." Lucas got a little anxious and said, "Then what about you?" The president was such a precious person. He was extremely fussy even when on business trips. Once there was something in the room that didn't meet his expectations, he would immediately change hotels. Letting him suffer in such a small rental house with no place to rest and having him sit on the chair by the bed all the time was too negligent. Lucas was afraid that he would shorten his lifespan. Leo leaned down, looked into Lucas' eyes, suddenly knelt on the bed on one knee, pulled back the quilt, stepped over with his long legs, and lay down beside Lucas, saying, "Is this okay?" Lucas was stunned. His first reaction was, "What if I infect you?" Leo looked deeply at Lucas. He didn't expect Lucas to focus on such a strange point and said, "If you were going to infect me, you would have done it already." It seemed so. Lucas whispered, "It's all because my bed is too small. Stop talking and go to sleep." If Lucas kept talking, Leo couldn't help but have inappropriate thoughts. The two of them were lying in the same bed. Fortunately, there was more than one pillow and the temperature was not low. Leo gave most of the quilt to Lucas, felt his forehead, and found that he was no longer having a fever. He said, "Keep sleeping. You're still sick." Lucas lay on his side on the pillow. Instead of closing his eyes immediately, he stared at Leo's shoulders, chest, and waist. Being so close, he could better appreciate that Leo had a great figure. He was tall and vigorous with a strong sense of oppression. The whole bed became even narrower because of his presence. If his nose wasn't blocked, he should be able to smell a faint scent of men's perfume. Lucas felt his body getting hot. He thought to himself, "Could I be having a fever again?" Leo turned his head and saw Lucas, staring directly at him with his eyes wide open. Those eyes were covered with a layer of mist due to illness, looking watery and shiny. Being stared at like this, Leo felt a tightness in his throat. Leo said, "Go to sleep quickly." Lucas said pitifully, "Mr. Leo, you are so fierce." After saying that, he inched closer to Leo and whispered, "I can't fall asleep for a while." Leo didn't want to be so harsh either. He just wanted to hide his slight embarrassment and restlessness at the moment. Looking at Lucas, who obediently moved closer to him and was extremely docile, he thought for a moment and whispered, "Then let's have a chat." Leo also turned over on his side, propped his arm on the bed, supported his head, and faced Lucas. Lucas raised his eyes and looked into Leo's deep eyes. The two were so close that they could touch each other's bodies with just a slight movement. Lucas heard Leo say, "First, let's discuss the first topic. What's that doll over there? And why is there a photo of me on its head?" The expression on Lucas's face went blank for a moment. He must be out of his mind with the illness. He actually forgot about that Mr. Leo doll. Lucas said weakly, "How about we just go to sleep?" Leo said, "Sleeping is okay too. Then I'll ask you tomorrow." Lucas. He couldn't avoid it. The bedside lamp beside them was still on. Even though the light was dim, Leo could see Lucas's eyes wandering and his pupils flickering. Leo squinted his eyes. He saw that thing on the cabinet as soon as he entered the room. After all, there was his face printed on it, which made him a little stunned. After Lucas fell asleep, Leo observed carefully and found that it was a very strange thing. On the surface, it was a doll looking rather ugly. The front of its clothes said braised beef flavor, and the back had the name of an instant noodle brand. The most special thing was that there was a photo of him pasted on the big head of the doll. Leo looked closely and found that it was a photo of him from Baidu. This photo was carefully selected and uploaded by Ivy. It was said to make him look energetic and fully reflect the demeanor of a CEO. Leo never expected this photo to appear on the face of an ugly doll. Lucas coughed and said, "I regard this doll as you and put it on the cabinet. It's like seeing you all the time. I use it to motivate myself constantly and remind myself to stay true to my original aspiration and work hard." Leo would be a fool to believe him. "He calls you when he's feeling guilty or distant recently." Leo said, "I thought you would stick needles in it and curse me with it." Although it wasn't that extreme, the basic purpose was similar. Lucas wouldn't admit it. "How could I? Your image in my heart is so lofty and so valiant. How could I do voodoo on you?" Lucas looked at Leo with a look of utmost sincerity while secretly wiggling his toes under the quilt. Damn it, it's so embarrassing. He's almost dug out a villa with his toes. He forgot that he and Leo were under the same quilt. Leo saw him wriggling like a worm under the quilt, then lifted his long leg and pressed on his foot. Lucas immediately got so scared that he didn't dare to move. Anyway, since he can accept being bad-mouthed behind his back, voodoo isn't a big deal. Leo said expressionlessly, "Get a nicer one next time." The instant noodle doll was too ugly. After all, he's the little prince of instant noodles. Lucas didn't dare to say more and shrank under the quilt. His foot was pressed by Leo's calf and he couldn't move. His body temperature rose a little, not because of the fever, and even his nose became unblocked. He didn't dare to talk about this topic anymore and asked in a muffled voice, "Mr. Leo, how did you know where I live?" Leo said, "I'm the boss of the company. It's easy for me to know the employees' information." Lucas raised his face and asked seriously, "Did you come here on purpose?" Instead of answering, Leo reached out and stroked Lucas' rosy face. Lucas took it as a default and inched closer to Leo. The distance between the two of them shortened again. Leo originally thought that he was still wearing his outer clothes and he just lay down to soothe Lucas and let him go to sleep earlier so he shouldn't get too close. Now that neither of them was sleepy, Leo let go. He simply reached out, pulled Lucas closer, stroked his hair and said gently, "Let's move on to the next topic." Lucas thought there was another embarrassing topic waiting for him and stared at Leo nervously with wide-open eyes. Leo said, "I want to talk about the matter between me and Nolan. Would you like to listen?" Lucas was stunned. The president finally started to talk. Seeing that Lucas didn't respond, Leo darkened his eyes and said in a low voice, "Forget it. You're still sick. Go to bed early." Lucas grabbed Leo's hand and held it in his own palm, showing a star-eyed expression and saying, "I'll listen. Please tell me." Instead, Leo found it a bit hard to speak. He pulled Lucas over, pressed his head down and let him lean on his chest so that he couldn't see his face, then said, "You should also know that Miss Elena is the chairman's second wife." Lucas nodded obediently. Leo felt the fluffy head move slightly in his arms and slightly curved his lips, saying, "Although Miss Elena was popular as a star and was considered rich among ordinary people, she was far from those wealthy families. The Fu family, the maiden family of the chairman's first wife, is a typical wealthy and aristocratic family." Lucas knew that those who could manipulate capital all came from top-tier wealthy families. The Fu family helped the chairman a lot and invested a lot of money in the early years. Who would have thought that the wife passed away too early? After Miss Elena married into the Qin family, you can imagine her situation. Many people said that Elena married Alexander simply for money. They said that the former Mrs. Alexander and the Fu family had planted a lot of trees on the Qin family's land, and Elena, this star, just enjoyed the shade. Lucas said softly, "It was not easy for the lady." Leo didn't comment on his own mother and continued, "At that time, the chairman already had a son, Nolan. He didn't want to have another child at first. As a result, Miss Elena got pregnant unexpectedly. After she pleaded hard, the chairman agreed to let her give birth to the child." Lucas wanted to ask how Leo knew all these things. Before he could ask, he heard Leo say, "It would have been better if it were a girl," the chairman said at that time. Lucas suddenly raised his head from Leo's arms and looked at him in shock. Did the chairman even say such things? It's too much. Lucas was a bit angry and said, "How can he be like this? What's wrong with girls? Even if you were a girl, you could still be the president." Although it was to speak up for him, it sounded a bit strange. Leo pressed Lucas' head back and then said, "Anyway, that's the situation. My birth wasn't very welcome. Ms. Elena was afraid that others would say that we mother and son bullied the legitimate son of the first wife, so she always lived carefully and was very nice to Nolan." As Leo was speaking, he paused. "For a certain period of time, she was even nicer to him than to me." Lucas grabbed Leo's clothes, feeling a twinge in his heart. The chairman was biased from the start. Unexpectedly, Ms. Elena was also like this. How troubled Leo must have been when he was a child. Clearly having a father and a mother, yet he didn't receive their love. During festivals, a large group of people from the Fu family would appear in the Qin family's mansion. In front of those people, Ms. Elena was even more cautious. She and the chairman created an image of harmony. And Nolan was always the focus of attention of the Fu family people. So the three of them communicated with the guests while I watched from the side. Leo's tone was very calm. After all, he was older now. There was no emotional fluctuation when recalling his childhood. Just a bit more scrutiny. A child is just a child. If it were him now, he would definitely cause trouble and wouldn't just stand by and watch. At that time, Nolan was also young. He lost his mother, and his father found him a stepmother. He was probably a bit psychologically distorted. He didn't like to talk to me and only focused on studying, as if he wanted to prove himself through study and then grab the chairman's attention. Everyone who was familiar with the situation of the Chin family would tell me when they saw me that your elder brother has no mother, while you have your mother's love, so don't snatch things from your elder brother. At that time, the young Leo still thought that his mother didn't love him either, but he took all these words to heart. So, I avoided situations where Nolan was present. I didn't want the things Nolan wanted. Since Nolan had good academic performance, it was okay for me to just do so. So, gradually, a very terrifying result emerged. Lucas's heart clenched. He leaned against Leo's chest, biting his lips. I became a transparent person in the Chin family. No one cared, no one paid attention. The youngest child gradually became silent. It's hard to imagine, right? Leo noticed that Lucas was holding his clothes tightly and said jokingly, I hardly spoke at that time, and Nolan was very arrogant and always ignored me. The eldest son was outstanding and proud. The chairman's business was booming. The second wife was beautiful and gentle, and she was wholeheartedly good to her stepson. The youngest son was a bit inferior but was well behaved and never caused trouble. A harmonious family was the best state. But this state was morbid and couldn't withstand any test at all. Leo said, later, something happened, and everything changed. Then, Leo fell silent. Lucas obediently waited for Leo to speak. But after a long time, there was no sound. Lucas suddenly realized something, looked up, and said softly, Mr. Leo, it's okay. Leo didn't want to talk. That incident should have had a great impact on him, and it doesn't seem to be a good thing. Lucas suddenly felt that he was so cruel. If he hadn't questioned Leo, Leo wouldn't have dug out these past events. Lucas nervously raised his hand and covered Leo's mouth. Stop talking. Don't keep stabbing yourself in the heart. Leo's lips touched Lucas's palm, and his gaze was intense. He also had concerns. Lucas was still sick. There was no reason for him to accompany Leo to bear the heavy past. So Leo pulled down Lucas's hand, held it in his palm, and said, let's talk about something happy. After that incident, the entire Chin family had a major reversal. Elena finally woke up and began to pay attention to her son. She used to be in the entertainment industry. As long as she thought it through, she had countless ways to seek benefits for her son. Nolan and Leo also changed. Nolan became cynical and had a wild period, but his grades were still excellent. Finally, he plunged into scientific research and became a science geek. Leo changed from being introverted to being sarcastic. He said whatever was on his mind and no longer suppressed himself, often making people extremely angry. Naturally, the first person Leo practiced his sharp tongue on was his father. Lucas looked at Leo painfully. Leo patted his head and comforted him instead. The time when I went against the chairman was really happy, but that was his own father. Which child doesn't hope that his father can love him? Nolan was trained as the heir since childhood. Both the Chin family and the Fu family placed high hopes on him, but I didn't want to let them have their way. Leo started to compete and fight. His opponent was Nolan. The year I graduated, Nolan was already working in the company. If there were no mistakes, he would be promoted step by step. I just had to join the company too. They tried every means to stop me from entering the headquarters, so I joined Shearway. Lucas could imagine what a fierce battle it was. At that time, new energy wasn't favored by people, and Shearway's prospects were worrying. Even if Leo went to Shearway, he couldn't make much of a splash. But Leo grew up together with Shearway. That's how it is. I've always had a grudge against Nolan, Leo said in a gloomy tone. He has so much. I don't like him. Warm family affection, the attention of many, and the inherited power. These are things Nolan was born with, but Leo didn't have any of them. Deep down, Leo knew that Nolan also had times when he was involuntary, but he had developed a conditioned reflex. In Leo's eyes, Nolan was a synonym for loss. Whenever he saw Nolan, he would start to wonder if his things were going to be taken away again. This was an uncontrollable and pathological psychology, just like his obsessive-compulsive disorder, which he couldn't overcome. Leo tightly held Lucas's hand and said, "I'm saying all this mainly to explain that this time, I really mixed personal feelings with work. Seeing Nolan chatting and laughing with you made me annoyed. I deliberately prevented you from contacting Nolan, which affected your normal work." It was the first time Lucas heard Leo analyze himself and the first time he saw him admit his mistake. Lucas felt his nose was even more blocked. Lucas said in a thick nasal voice, "Sorry, Mr. Leo. It's my fault. I shouldn't have blamed you or forced you to say these things. I just wanted to know you." Lucas thought he wasn't a person with a strong curiosity, but this time he had pushed Leo to such an extent. He thought for a long time about why he could blindly obey without asking for reasons before, but not this time. It was because he vaguely sensed that Leo was a bit different this time. He wanted to know the different sides of Leo. But he began to regret and feel sorry for Leo. The president didn't have to explain, but he seriously analyzed his own state of mind and tried to make Lucas understand. It was all his fault that Leo had to expose his own wounds. Lucas couldn't hold back anymore. He opened his arms and hugged Leo, whispering, "I shouldn't have lost my temper." It was a pity that his hand was taken out of Leo's palm, but it was worth it to get an active hug. Leo said, "I have a strange personality and can't control myself. There will be many similar things in the future. I'm telling you in advance." Lucas thought, "Isn't it well known that you have a strange personality?" Lucas said, "Then I'm also giving you a heads up. I'm a bit fussy and will lose my temper." Leo pinched Lucas's nose and said, "I know. You have the most petty emotions." After pinching, he showed a look of disgust. "You're not having a runny nose, are you?" Lucas threw himself into Leo's arms and deliberately rubbed his face against his shirt, saying, "It'll be clean after a wipe." Leo grabbed Lucas by the collar and pulled him back. Lucas couldn't help laughing and shouted, "Please give me more guidance in the future, Mr. Leo. They are not perfect people, but they are willing to communicate. There is nothing more wonderful than this." The corner of Leo's mouth curved up a little more. Lucas was still sick after all. After they talked for a while, he showed a tired look. Leo patted him on the back and said, "Go to sleep. We'll talk about the rest after you recover from your illness." Lucas nodded drowsily and closed his eyes. Leo looked at the sickly face of the young secretary, and his heart softened. Before Leo came here, he didn't think he would say those words. Maybe the atmosphere tonight was so good that he couldn't help but express his feelings. After saying it out, it wasn't as embarrassing as he imagined. Instead, he felt relaxed and comfortable. Thinking that Lucas was asleep, he slowly leaned over, traced the lines of Lucas's face with his eyes, and finally his gaze landed on the faintly red lips. Usually bright lips had turned pale because of the illness, but they still looked so soft. Leo was spellbound and couldn't take his eyes off. At this time, Lucas murmured, "I'm an only child and grew up in a loving family." Leo stopped. Lucas opened his eyes. His gaze was as gentle as water and as serene as the wind. He said, "Mr. Leo, don't be sad. I'll share the love I've received with you." Leo pursed his lips, suppressing the emotions in his heart, and said in a hoarse voice, "Good night." Lucas slept soundly. The body's functions repaired themselves during sleep, and the illness gradually disappeared. When he woke up the next day, he felt much better. He couldn't help but grunt twice and hugged the pillow in his arms even tighter. "Wait, the pillow seems a bit hard." Lucas opened his eyes and found a chest in front of him. The shirt on the chest was a bit wrinkled by him, revealing the strong muscle contours inside. Lucas looked up and met Leo's eyes. "You're awake, octopus." Lucas didn't understand why he was called an octopus. Leo looked down and motioned for him to look for himself. Only then did Lucas see that he was clinging to Leo with his hands and feet, and his whole body was tightly pressed against Leo's arms, with no gap between the two of them. Lucas blushed instantly. Sleeping in the same bed, it's okay to do some small actions, but why are they sleeping in each other's arms? Lucas immediately let go of the president's body, pulled the quilt over to cover his face, only showing a pair of big black eyes, and said shyly, "Good morning, Mr. Leo." Leo got free and got up from the bed, saying, "It's not early." Looking at his wrinkled clothes, he was extremely disgusted. "You can lie down for a while. I'll go take a shower first and then get something to eat." He still underestimated his own cleanliness. Last night, Lucas rolled into his arms. At first, he thought the little secretary was so sweet and cute, but later, when he thought that he hadn't changed his clothes and Lucas was sweating all over, the sweetness turned into torture. Leo stood up, with the laziness of just waking up, disheveled in clothes and tall in stature. He raised his hand to brush his hair, and the black hair slipped through his slender fingers. Lucas felt that his heartstrings were also plucked. "I have to say, the president is so handsome." Lucas blushed while admiring the eye-catching scene. Suddenly, he remembered something and quickly said, "Mr. Leo, I'll get you some clothes to change. I have new ones." Leo turned around, looked at Lucas, and said in a strange tone, "No need. There are my clothes in the wardrobe."